Well, it's been a while since we've looked at another Universal Monster movie, hasn't it? I apologize for the delay, but we're gonna fix that right now. However, this is going to be a bit of a shorter review because there is not a whole lot to talk about with this one. It barely has any background, and even though it has a decent plot, that's really about it. It doesn't have any production notes or nothing. Outside of the fact that Lon Chaney himself hated playing as the Mummy. Like, he hated it. Which we'll talk about, but it's sad that he has to resort to a certain thing to make it more bearable for himself. Which, I mean, I can't say I blame him, because the Mummy seems like a really boring character to play, because Universal is now just content with making the Mummy into a slasher villain rather than the interesting, complex character that he used to be in the original 1931 movie. But when you put all that aside, is this movie good? Well, both yes and no. It's not a bad movie, and I do think it is a little better than The Mummy's Hand, but not by much. It's still nothing more than decent. I'll try to do my best to explain why. So, what's up? What's happening? What's going on? Everybody, welcome back to Animation Station, your resistor for anything and everything animation, including TV and movies, and especially monster films. I am your host and local monster fan, Jackson Small. Welcome back to 31 Days of Horror Monster-Mania. Welcome to my review of The Mummy's Tomb, the third movie in the Mummy series, and the second movie in the Karis Mummy series. Yeah, as I said last time, Universal started a series within a series by making it a soft reboot into a mummy that's not nearly as interesting, unique, memorable, or complex as Imhotep, and that served as nothing more than a hollow blueprint for what would become the slasher genre. However, that doesn't mean these movies are bad. I didn't hate Mummy's Hand by any means, it just had a lot of really stupid things in it. And The Mummy's Tomb, while it improves some things, it also screws up a lot of others. I'll do my best to explain. But first, let's get through the tiny little bit of background info we have. Like, it is tiny. There's barely anything about this movie at all. Which you're seeing a pattern of with these Silver Age horror movies, because for some reason, these are just not as well documented as their contemporaries from the past horror cycle. Why? I don't know, but whatever. So, background info. Mummy's Tomb is a 1942 horror film, and that's a sequel to The Mummy's Hand from 1940. Lon Chaney Jr. disliked the role of Karis the Mummy. Makeup artist Jack Pierce spent up to 8 hours to wrap Chaney in bandages. A rubber mask was used for long shots, which is why it just looks so cheap and crap. And for unknown reasons, Wallace Ford's character name is changed from Jensen from the previous film to Hansen in this film, for literally no reason, other than just contrived laziness. So, Lon Chaney Jr. hated being the Mummy so much that he would literally drink alcohol underneath his bandages. And whenever he has to, lie still, there are rumors circulating that he was actually asleep in those moments. Obviously, we can't ask Chaney himself this because, he's long passed away. He's dust by now, pretty much. So, unfortunately, it's all up to speculation, but it is sad that this guy hated this role so much that he had to resort to drinking on set. Now, that obviously would not fly today, but again, this is 1942. The standards of back then were way different and much more lax than the standards of now. So, what's the plot of The Mummy's Tomb? Well, it's both very extensive, but also kind of formulaic. I'll do my best to explain. It picks up the story 30 years after the conclusion of the previous entry, and it begins with Steve Banning, played by Dick Foran, reciting the story of Karis to his family and evening guests in his Mapleton, Massachusetts home. Footage from Mummy's Hand appears as Banning tells his story, because now it's pretty much stock footage. And then as he concludes his story, his tale of the successful destruction of the creature, the scene switches back to the tombs of Egypt. Surviving their supposed demise, Andaheb, yes, this guy's back again, wonderful, explains the legend of Karis to his follower, Mehmet Bey. I'm just going to call him Bey for simplicity's sake. After passing on the instructions for the use of the Tana leaves and assigning the task of terminating the remaining members of the Banning expedition and their descendants, Andahab officially expires and finally dies. Why they didn't just leave him dead after the last movie, I don't know. Bay and Karis then leave Egypt for the journey to the US. Bay takes the caretaker's job at the local cemetery, sets up shop, and administers the Tana brew to Karis. The monster sets out to avenge the desecration of Ananka's tomb, his first victim being Stephen Banning, whom the creature kills as the aging archaeologist prepares for bed. So that's one character from the beginning of the movie that's already gone. As the sheriff, played by Cliff Clark, and coroner, played by Emmett Vogan, can't come up with a lead, newspapermen converge on Mapleton to learn more about the murder. This is when Babe Hansen, yes, that's literally his name, played again by Wallace Ford, arrives on the scene after learning of his friend's death. When Jane Banning, played by Mary Gordon, Steve's sister, is killed, Hansen is convinced it is the work of a mummy. How he comes to that conclusion, I don't know. Random 40s cheesy contrived bullshit. Meeting with the sheriff and coroner, Hansen is unable to convince them of the identity of the culprit. He tells his new story to the paperman at the local bar, but is himself dispatched by Karis almost immediately afterwards. So that's another character from the original gone. And by original, I mean the movie that came before this, not the 1932 movie. Different mummy, okay? Just want to make that clear. Then John Banning enlists the help of Professor Norman, Frank Riker, to solve the puzzle of the grayish mark found on the victims. Norman's test results prove that Hansen was right. The substance was indeed mold from a mummy. Okay, I guess I can kind of buy that it kind of falls off his bandage as he kills people, or maybe it's like on his hand as he's choking them out, but I don't know. It just feels very B-movie to me. Meanwhile, Bay has plans of his own, knowing that Banning and his girlfriend, Isabel Evans, played by Elise Knox, are planning to marry. He sets out to disrupt their nuptials, however you pronounce that. Bay himself has been smitten with Isabel and sends Karis on a mission to bring her to him. Karis initially balks, but finally adheres to Bay's command. In an effective sequence, the monster stealthily enters the Evans home and abducts the girl. At the cemetery, Bay unveils his plan to the reluctant Isabel, explaining that she is to become the bride of a high priest of Karnak, and bear him an heir to the royal line. Banning and the rest of the townspeople have become convinced that their recent Egyptian transplant may be involved in the crimes. Arriving in force to confront Bay at the cemetery, Karis slips away with Isabel unbeknownst to the horde, and Bay attempts to shoot Banning, but is himself gunned down by the sheriff. The creature is then observed heading towards the Banning estate, and the group begins pursuit. Inside the home, Banning manages to rescue Isabel from Karis with the aid of the sheriff and the coroner. The townspeople set fire to the house, and the monster perishes in the flames. Banning and Isabel wed, and the curse is brought to an end. Until the next movie, when Karis is brought back again, but we'll talk about that another time. Critical reviews of the film are mostly negative. Film critics felt the movie failed to live up to the standards of other Universal horror films. Which they're not wrong about. It is definitely a huge drop back, but then again, this entire Silver Age has pretty much been a huge drop off, so not really all that surprising. But it's not a bad movie either. It's watchable. I have no problem with it. It's just that, again, when you compare it to the original Mummy, yeah, it's not even close. It doesn't even hold a candle. It's just cash grab, shuffled out sequels at this point. So, final thoughts. Another odd case, because while this is a sequel to Mummy's Hand and the second installment in the Karis series, it also feels pretty different from its predecessors. The titular Mummy is now played by Lon Chaney Jr., who was fresh off of his breakout role in The Wolfman, which, again, I've already reviewed. Before you say I skipped it, I didn't. I already reviewed it back in January. However, sadly, according to reports and archivers, he had such a terrible time in the role he was actually drinking alcohol under his bandages while he was shooting. And unfortunately, it's not hard to see why, as Karis himself is a boring, lifeless, murdering brute who's a far cry from Imhotep. That being said, though, while the actual monster sucks, the film itself is decent. Characters are a little better than Hand. They're not great, but they're a little better. Runtime is still brisk, atmosphere is eerie, the kills, while tamed by today's standards, are still mostly effective by the standards of 1942. Ending is solid, and the production value is still really good. If you can get past the monster itself being forgettable and the writing being hit or miss, it's worth a watch. Like, it's nothing special, it's nothing revolutionary, it's nothing super memorable, but it's not painful either. It's not a terrible movie. It's watchable, it's perfectly serviceable. And if you want to see where the slasher franchise that turned to a subgenre got its start, this is where it all started. This miniseries is what started the slasher genre. So, with all that said, my final verdict for The Mummy's Tomb is going to be a 6 out of 10. It's a decent film. It's not great, but it's decent. It's watchable. There's far worse things you could be watching than this. But next time, though, oh boy, we got quite the interesting little adventure to talk about next time. Because next time, we're taking a look at the movie that started not only the Monster Mash of the Universal Monster series, not only started the numerous Frankenstein crossovers to happen within the monster pantheon, but is also the one that served as the blueprint for every single crossover and cinematic universe that's still being made to this very day by modern filmmakers. Yes, this movie really is that significant. I'll tell you all about it next time when we talk about the super cheesy but super fun entry that finally gives a shot of adrenaline in the arm to this mostly mediocre Silver Age of the Universal horror cycle with Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.